We're going to spend a lot of time this semester looking at how the internet and the First Amendment intersect with one another. But I thought it would be useful to give you a little overview of some of the key areas that they've already crossed paths and what's been the result. In Really, this starts about the mid 1990s because that's when the internet went into much more prevalent use among the general public. And so we had what we call the Great Cyber Porn Panic of 1995. And that was really the fear that because the internet was being streamed into your home, there wasn't a great deal of control over it like a broadcast would have had. How do we know what was going to be coming in and affecting our children? So we initiated in 1996, the Congress did the Communications Decency Act, and the idea here was that it was going to criminalize the transmission of information that was obscene or indecent to minors. So it was passed in February. Bill Clinton signed it into law, and the language here that is most interesting, of course, is what it prevents, which is it basically bars people under the age of 18 from being subjected to patently offensive material as measured by contemporary community standards. So that opened itself up for a pretty big challenge, and that resulted in this case in 1996, which is RENO versus the ACLU. The ACLU felt that this language was really broad, and this idea of regulating the internet based on community standards could be open to almost any interpretation. The RENO in this case is Janet Reno of the government. She was the Attorney General, and when the government has a case like this, it can go directly to the Supreme Court, and that's what happened here, was a challenge to say, did these provisions of the Communications Decency Act violate both the First and the Fifth Amendment by being overbroad and vague in defining the type of internet communication that would be criminalized? And basically, the Supreme Court said yes, that the act was a violation of the First Amendment because it was a content-based blanket restriction of speech. And really, there was no way that we could at this point regulate the internet in the way that we regulated broadcast, and so this restriction was struck down, and we really haven't faced a great deal of internet regulation until recently, and you may have heard of it. And that would be net neutrality. We've had this case come up recently. Net neutrality actually took effect June 12th of 2015, and the goal here was to create an open and equal internet. We had both the opportunity, of course people always see a business opportunity when there is one, and that was that we could have the internet be sped up or slowed down depending on how much money we spent, whether our internet provider was partnered with a Netflix or some other type of streaming service or Amazon Prime. So maybe if they had a partnership with Prime and not Netflix, we could see Prime movies faster than we could see the others. So the FCC took charge of this and actually passed this legislation or this agreement. And basically, these are the things that it said: that you can't block access to legal content. So we can't just suddenly decide we're not going to provide something. We can't throttle it, which is to really limit the flow and slow things down based on content application services. And we couldn't have paid prioritization. So we couldn't favor, when it came to internet traffic, we couldn't put someone in the fast lane based on the amount of money that they paid. Now, we've already seen this come into play. The FCC has already taken pretty quick action. AT&T, I don't know if any of you are AT&T customers, but they've been accused of throttling their customers when they reach the end of what would be a data cycle. If they're reaching kind of a capacity, even though they promoted unlimited data, if they reach a certain point, they were actually slowing their data down, is what the charge is from the FCC. So they've thrown out a $100 million fine over that, and we're going to have to wait and see what the end result is in that situation. Now, another issue that's come up, and we'll certainly talk about it in class, is this idea of the right to be forgotten. Many of you may have Googled yourselves and see things that maybe you don't want up there. In Europe, they've actually taken legal steps to prevent that. So Google now, when it's in Europe, has the obligation legally to take things down that are requested, that people find to be affecting them, some type of performance from the past that they feel is negatively stigmatizing them. We don't have that here in the United States, and in fact this only applies to the internet in Europe, but France right now is making a push that this be a worldwide change, and we're going to have to see where this goes.